You ever see a post online that you're kind of interested in, and once you get the context of it, it just blows up into an entire massive shit show that you just could not have expected to go any of the directions that it went? Because it happened to me today, and just about a post about DBD. And I'm assuming that a lot of people who are kind of like tapped into the DBD community kind of know what I'm talking about. But oh my god, was I not ready for the fallout that was happening here. But for those who don't know, I'm going to give a little bit of a lay of the land here, set up the situation. Basically, Dead by Daylight is celebrating its 10th anniversary, so it was kind of like a go big scenario for them when it came to their announcements of what they're adding to the game. A big one was obviously Jason. They added Jason to the game because it was finally just not a shit show to get his rights. And that was a character that a lot of people wanted to get into the game because it's Jason. He's one of the most iconic slashers of all time, if not the most iconic slasher of all time. And they also announced like a few more collaborations. They announced I think they were doing like a cosmetic Scooby-Doo collaboration, which is kind of funny. They were doing like a Terrifier collaboration. I think that's like he's a new killer. And they're doing a few more, but like I just kind of want to say they did a bunch of them that a lot of people were kind of like thinking that was kind of interesting. And I think they're expanding a little bit more collaborations that they already have. With this, a lot of people obviously were hyped to see the characters that they were adding, but they were also disappointed to see that the character they specifically wanted to be in the game was not added to the game. And I guess in the Dead by Daylight, like especially Twitter space, there's a bunch of accounts that are basically their entire function is to run positive press for their specific killer being in the game. And that entire context combined led to this tweet right here by the senior community director at the game Dead by Daylight. And it kind of looks like a subtweet at first, but you'll see why he made this tweet in the first place. So Eric Pope, who once again is the senior community director at the game Dead by Daylight, basically tweets out this tweet saying, if you run one of those Twitter accounts, insert license name for DBD, and all you're doing is pissing people off, you're not doing the license in question any favors. Basically just, obviously, when he's a community director, he has to see what the community's talking about. And maybe, he goes to the people who are there for licensing and stuff and being like, hey, can we get this character? Can we get this character? Can we get this character in the game? Because that's what the fans want. And when there's a bunch of accounts pushing for specific characters in the game, I would assume if one of them is really annoying, or assume if any of them is really annoying or just really like a terrible person, they can kind of just say, hey, we're not going to reward these types of fans because their fans are just being bad people and being annoying. And as a result, we're going to specifically not license them. This is, I would assume, specifically about one account in particular. Like, obviously not this Bioshock one right there because he said he was talking about it. It is actually about a Slenderman fan account who I just is having a rough go of it when it comes to their Twitter account and their Twitter presence. So it's this account right here that is kind of having a whole bunch of hoopla around it. I will say, I'm going to do my best because there are a bunch of people dogpiling on this person to handle what they're saying in the most beneficial way towards them possible. But I think they're doing an absolutely terrible job, even if they're being like benevolent here, of like properly explaining what they want or like what they mean when they're like having disagreements. And a big thing about this isn't even that Slenderman didn't get added to the game. Obviously, they're very unhappy that Slenderman didn't get into the game because I saw them comment under a bunch of posts saying, hey, I'm not interested in this character. Like when Terrifier, when like, even though a bunch of the other collaborations that they were doing, they said no thank you, right, and stuff like that. So it was kind of like being annoying and, just like hating on stuff that was supposed to hype up new additions. It was one pick in particular that this account had right here that just blew everything into the fucking moon of just being a catastrophe for this person's press on the internet. I don't even know how to better describe it. But let's see kind of what the scenery was surrounding this person's like negative press campaign that they accidentally ran on themselves. This is kind of one of the tweets that I was talking about where they say LMFAO, no thanks. And it was specifically into the Dead by Daylight, the Life Road update on June 25th. They're adding a new survivor. And there's a very important thing about the survivor that kind of made this person get a lot of hate. And the fact is that this survivor is Shane Wigwas. If I pronounced it wrong, I'm absolutely sorry. But the important thing is that this guy is the first native survivor in Dead by Daylight. And I think, because this is kind of a big thing in Dead by Daylight, it's the first native man or first native person in general to be in this game. It was kind of a big thing, and a lot of people were making note of it because it's kind of like good to make note of that stuff, saying like, hey, this is kind of a big step. This game has been along for a decade. It's added like so many survivors. And this is the first native person who we put into the game as a survivor. Very easily, it does come across as kind of weird and kind of odd to just say LMFAO, no thanks to this, when it's kind of like a cool addition if you think about it. It's kind of interesting. They're expanding themselves into a lot more culturals and like including a lot more cultures. Even if I guess you could say like, oh, they're adding a new culture into a game about where the survivors are supposed to be killed and stuff like that, which you could argue that if you wanted to argue that in bad faith. It is neat to see that this is an addition that they're adding, especially like when it's not, completely stereotypical and racist. It looks like a pretty a pretty good faith representation of Native culture. And obviously, because of, this looking like it was kind of a racist thing to say, because you were just saying no thanks to a Native survivor being entered the game, a lot of people are going to call you a loser, are going to call you racist, because of the type of reaction that you had to the first Native survivor being added into the game. Well, how would this person respond to this? How would this person respond to this? All these accusations of being racist. And I would say in a pretty poorly way, they responded to all these accusations and all these, hate that they were getting. And so I can't really show legitimately every single one of the threads that this person has been in, because I legitimately try to find any other paragraph that they wrote before this, because they do mention a paragraph that they wrote early on or something like that started all the arguments that they got in. But let me tell you, a lot of their interactions with people go like this, basically, where the Slenderman said, he forgot to mention the part where he argued for several hours and it's subjective whether or not a novel I wrote when I was 5 is highly quality writing. I work 50 hours a week. I don't have time to entertain Pewter Illusion with the chronically online for hours in my off time. And if you want to know what this interaction kind of looked like, I'm not going to read it all because I have 2 other really long threads I'm going to read, but just take a look at this argument that they had. He just kind of types about this corny posts from this account, calling this guy's account corny, and then they fucking argue for such a long time on Twitter about, I don't even know what, I guess just their disagreements with each other over everything about the game, everything in the state of the game, and just everything like that. So as you can see, they do get in a lot of long arguments, and I cannot, for the life of me, it would probably take about an hour and a half to fully represent the entire situation. So if you're interested, go to their accounts, go to the reply section, and just look for yourself about what they're saying. But obviously, a lot of people are mad at this person for saying LMFAO, no thanks, just out of kind of unprompted to the first Native survivor in Dead by Daylight. So they obviously tried to justify their reaction to all this hate that they're getting from the community of Dead by Daylight. So let's kind of read what they have to say and see where their justification for their actions went entirely and completely wrong. So basically, people want a reason to cancel me so bad that they're seeing me say I don't want the boring new survivor paragraph and claiming I'm racist. The jumps in logic are insanity. I don't like male survivors, and forcing diversity without letting it happen naturally is disrespectful. I want to expand on this a little since I had to lock replies on account of the community's collective delusion. Essentially, I don't want this chapter because I don't care for male survivors, and I see behaviors attempts at diversity to be dubious in their intent. If you do something like this, you should do one of 2 things. You make him a minority race and just don't acknowledge it. Let him be part of the game naturally like everyone else because he deserves that. If you want to make a deal out of his race, please put in the effort to make sure it's given a highlight for the reason that blends into the game seamlessly. The way they did it screams, we think everything needs to be about his race because people are lost puppies that need our help to be included. Unfortunately, Twitter is a platform that thrives on short-form content that misses all of its relevant context. So since the character kind of so limited. You don't agree with my viewpoint, but calling me a racist just because you disagree with me is immature. I don't own any of you anything, and I'd never said anything racist. Stop jumping to your own hallucinated conclusions and read my words for what they actually say. And I'm going to read the second thread before I give my full take, because obviously they had to restate what they said. They kind of assumed that the Eric Pope tweet was about them specifically because obviously they're in this massive argument, and they tried to restate what their argument was in this entire scenario. Basically, they go as, there's lots to be said, and I'm more than happy to explain in more detail. I personally see Eric Pope and Dork as 2 of the best people in a company that I find distasteful at the higher level. However, there's been a lot of mischaracterization going on, and I feel like to make another thread discussing it. I haven't responded until now because I was asleep and then at work for a long shift. That's just life. I usually avoid social media because it's short-form approach causes a lot of misunderstandings. I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea. I will not be walking back anything I have said because I'm entitled to my view on the matter just as much as you are. What started as a passing remark for me has spiraled into senseless accusations based on nothing but inferred reading between the lines that don't exist. Time for some context. I personally have a deep-seated love for culture besides my own, perhaps excessively so at times. Considering I have always dreamed of a wife who's literally an intelligent alien, I won't talk about it more here, but you get the point. And I know it's sad and cringe, but I'm an autist among autists, so what can I say? But anyway, the point is that I've always felt drawn to that which is unfamiliar. This often leads me to react quite negatively to things which are typical of my own country and culture, because I find it boring and tiresome, perhaps to an irrational degree. And so this leads me to this chapter. I didn't like the new Survivor paragraph because I saw the key art style, and despite its beauty, immediately knew the intent behind it. For many years, companies have used diversity and LGBT themes for profit, essentially using cultures as a performative max to sell something without actually representing it. Behavior is known for this type of thing as they push this type of stuff on the front of their social media marketing all the time. I find it patronizing to the groups they are actually trying to celebrate, as it suggests that they see these groups as a mean to corporate end, and I think they are gracious and doing them some kind of favor. Cultures such as these are rich enough that they should speak for themselves. Perhaps the most annoying thing is how they introduce the survivor as the first indigenous survivor before anything. Is not all these characters are to them means to check a box regarding the character's ethnicity. I find it insulting. As if they simply introduced him as a new survivor and just so happened to be indigenous, it would allow him to blend without being lifted like a trophy. Please note that this does not reflect upon the intentions behind the many talented individuals that behave as individuals. Despite my distaste for the company at large, the passion for culture behind the team itself, I have no doubt is very real. This includes the likes of Mr. Pope and Dork. Whether or not this is actually the intent of the powers that be at behavior is ultimately not relevant to the assumptions about me I seek to dispel. It's so easy to see something on social media and scream racist without actually engaging with the individual's viewpoint, and that is where you have all failed this anniversary. Yes, you. I'm talking about you reading this. Because we all know DBD Twitter is an echo chamber where nothing but frolicking, covering our ears, saying la 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 is allowed. Do better. Better than sending me death threats because you're incapable of reading what someone is actually saying. Do better than bandwagoning because you want to affirm your own beliefs that, frustratingly, I share. This goes out to all the content creators who hopped on the bandwagon without asking me to explain my view to them in detail before jumping to conclusions through nothing but inference. I'm looking at you, and then he tags 2 people and several others. You don't have to agree with me, but you should at least have the human decency to understand someone's stance before jumping on them to keep in the good looks of the rest of the hive. You, as content creators, have responsibility for this. I mean that with sincerity as, in the case of Alron and Pixie, I'm a fan and will continue to be because all I care about is the truth. Honestly, it's something I care about more than just anything else. In fact, I fixate upon it as with autistic intensity, as it's just the way I'm wired. That is why the new survivor bothered me so much, not because of the character himself, but because of why and how he was implemented by the corporate company powering the engine. I find it interesting that Schmuckles made a video about this, and unlike the Twitter echo chamber, at least half the comments were agreeing with me. Yes, you heard that right. This included an indigenous person. However, you don't have to agree with me. People should be allowed to disagree without one side labeling the other as heinous, just so they can avoid the uncomfortable conversation. You don't like that I challenge you. You just want to remain in your echo chamber and bounce the same message off each other because that makes you comfortable. I want exactly what you want, as I love diverse culture, but I want it represented via different means, and that's okay. It's okay to disagree with me. And it's okay to remain in your echo chamber. I won't try to remove it from it, as being comfortable in life is the most important thing about it, in my opinion. If you don't want to be challenged, block me and move on. But don't threaten my life and call me racist just because you don't agree. That's all I'm asking for. I won't be talking about this any further, as ultimately it's just a survivor paragraph. My remark was one made in mild annoyance for the reasons I've described here in detail. I never cared nearly as much as you guys about making me out to be something I'm not. Put your hate boners back in your pants and move on with your lives. I won't be going anywhere until either my dream of this account is realized or crushed to smithereens. I'll see you guys in the fog. I look forward to future discussion and speculation. To be honest, I don't use social media much, and we know Slenderman isn't coming out for at least a year, so I'll be less active. Feel free to celebrate that, and I'll join you in good humor. With all that being said, much love. Remember to respect each other for your differences and differences in opinion. Just because it's 2026 doesn't mean we can't disagree on something and still get along. Peace. So 2 just absolutely fucking massive Twitter threads. I think I understand what this person is trying to say. They're saying it in an absolutely, I honestly think, terrible way. But I think the fact that they're not properly explaining why they think it's a kind of a trophy character for behavior makes it so that a lot of people are getting mad at them. And also the fact that they're kind of playing themselves as a victim and kind of saying it's me versus the rest of the community, and that they are refusing to back down in any capacity. And they don't have to back down from their view, but they have to back down the way that they said it and say that it was only people misinterpreting it. I think what the person is saying is that the inclusion of Shane Wigwans as a native character and saying that he was the first native character to be added to DBD is sort of commodifying a diversity thing, in the sense that they're using it specifically just to say, hey, look at us being diverse, look at how good we are, now please buy our product, please buy our stuff, we're begging you as a company, and you love us. I think that's what they're trying to argue, in the sense that they're saying that because behavior is a corporation, any sort of celebration of diversity in any capacity, any sort of distinct acknowledgement of diversity in this in this specific way is specifically only for them to make money. I think though this was done in such a horrifically bad way and not really properly stated that it just makes them look bad. Because first saying LMFAO don't care or LMFAO no thanks to the first native man kind of makes you seem racist, because you're kind of just completely diminishing the addition of a new character. And saying that you don't like it specifically because they said it was a native man, it's kind of not good. It makes you, it's difficult to say that this doesn't make you seem racist, especially when you're doubling down as much as you are on this take. This person, I think, just had a bad take, or they had a benevolent viewpoint that they kind of expressed in a bad way. I think they just have more of an antagonistic view of behavior because they're a corporation rather than the actual intentions of behavior. I think in this scenario, and I think I disagree with them in the point that they're trying to make in the sense that, like, celebrating diversity in this way just commodifies it and it cannot be done in a benevolent way, because I feel like it does need to be acknowledged. The game has been around for 10 years. It has, like, a lot of diverse people and it has a lot of gay people, it has trans people in it. It just has a bunch of different people, diverse cast. And I think that the fact that they've had this much diversity and it took them a decade to add a native man to the game should be something that should be acknowledged. I know the argument will be, well, acknowledging, like, diverse people existing in a place where they weren't originally represented is kind of just like making a big spectacle out of it and saying it's something that's crazy and should never be acknowledged. It's kind of like the fucking Knuckles take from Sonic Boom. At the same time, you have to recognize its existence in the place that it is and, like, the importance that it's the first one. Shane Wiggins is the first person, like, a native person to be in the game, because it is important to acknowledge the progress that has been made and to celebrate the progress that has been made, and not just to completely just accept it as something that's just run of the mill. The goal is to get it to be as something as run of the mill. Maybe if they add another native character, it will be just kind of a run of the mill because they won't be the first one. But because the character broke this type of barrier, it is kind of important to acknowledge it, even if it does seem like a commodification or just like a flag waving saying, "Hey, we're the best." I think also too another bad part of this take, and, like, I think it was just a stupid thing to say and a stupid viewpoint to have, just saying, like, that they don't want male survivors. A lot of people just came back and clapped back with this thing saying that there's more female survivors in the entire game. I think a lot of the community also just likes more female survivors as well because, they have better customizations. Like, there is something they'd like them more, and, like, that's completely fine for the community to have. But I think also the fact that they had this, like, a random take come out of fucking nowhere where they're saying, "Hey, I don't like male survivors," just kind of just made you seem like you're closed-minded. And it didn't help once again when people are calling you racist and you have, like, the reaffirmation of your beliefs consistently in the way that you did, because they think that you're just not going to be willing to back down from your beliefs in any capacity. And the fact that you just, like, outright say that you don't like men in the game makes it seem like any other type of people that you say you don't want in the game are also, like, under that same thing of lack of justification. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So, I think the person here had a rough justification for the take that they had, in the sense that I think it came from the right point, but there's nothing particularly pointing to their beliefs being correct. And the fact that they're just completely willing to argue and die on this hill in any capacity makes it seem like they are more racist or more bigoted than they actually are. And I think that is on their fault for not realizing that that is the fault. Now, obviously, they did use the autistic claim where they say they are autistic, and, like, that is, once again, fair. I understand why they're this passionate about it. At the same time, you still should be able to, and I might be wrong with this, and if I'm wrong, tell me. You still should be able to understand why people are getting mad at you in any way, but maybe not. I could be wrong. This is, like, why I'm trying to extend the most possible benefit of the doubt to this person in any capacity because of this one specific trait that they listed. Now, obviously, I don't know if they're telling the truth or not. I'm just going to give them the benefit of the doubt in that scenario too. I think I've already given my take, and this is probably the longest fucking video I've ever made on it. And it's talking about DBD drama, which is kind of funny. But I think it's good that they added a native character in the game. I think it's good that they acknowledged it too, because it is something that is important, especially for a game with DBD's popularity, with DBD's cast, and, like, it's the first time, once again, we got a native character in the game. And I think this is just one person having a shit take, and then we're absolutely refusing to back down it in the fact that they tweeted, I think, like, over 500 tweets in the last 3 or 4 days defending their own viewpoint and also just, like, arguing with people online, which I think is absolute insanity. And so, yeah, you can see what I mean when I said this single tweet opened me into an entire shit show of takes, because this was a roller coaster of emotions, I would say, if I do say so myself. This was kind of a unique drama that I've seen on DB. A lot of the time it's people complaining about game balance, but this is the first time I've actually seen, like, a specific villain in the community not being able to readjust their claims to make it make sense instead of just reiterating what they want. That's kind of what I want to talk about today. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.